Where are you putting the mark in the count? The swing arm now coming back as our countdown continues.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, it's Brick Something, and we are here at the West Coast Mythic Meetup, which you've probably heard me talk about a lot the past couple of weeks. The event is actually happening here, live in real time, and we are about to look at. Look at these folks. He Mike and all this stuff, and look, a bunch of cool Star Wars stuff. But we are here in Sacramento-ish, Citrus Heights, and we're about to hang out with Eric Treadaway. I've got Sir Owain, who you all met a couple weeks ago. There's Nate, who you met also a couple weeks ago. There's a pretty empty Four Horsemen table because things have just flown off the table. So we're happy to have this sort of special opportunity to meet with Eric, and I'm going to let Owen over here, Sir Owain, take over. And if you can't tell, that's him. If you look in the back of his shirt, it's there you go. Nice. For easy identification. All right, so here we go, folks. Feel free to hang on.
Right. Hello, Eric.
Hey, Owen, how you doing?
It's been a while. I think the last time we saw each other, we were at a diner in New Jersey.
Yes, that's true. Probably about this time last year, right?
I think so, yeah. Well, welcome to Sacramento, at least the suburbs of Sacramento. Woo! Which is my new home. I moved here about 3 years ago. And I was in Kansas for about 6 years. And before that, I was right next door to the Four Horsemen and helping them out do really random things. It seems like I would do anything that somebody else didn't want to do. Is my job.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Eric. It's nice to have the ownership representation here today. We've got a few of your employees here, which are big celebrities to us here in Sacramento. So thank you. So I just wanted to go down. I had some questions for you, and I think the crowd will have a few questions for you too, time allowing. So I just want to start out. Maybe you could tell us how you design a character. Like, I remember when I was there in the shop, it was your sketches on like printer paper that were stuffed under other things and, you know, lost to time under old folders and old toys. So how has it changed now that you have full time you're doing Mythic Legions and Cosmic Legions? How has your process changed since those early days of working for Mattel and other companies?
You know, in some ways it's the same, some ways it's very different. When I do actually draw a character design up, yeah, those sheets of printer paper are still my go-to. You know, I've still got folders of just piles and piles of those sheets. Definitely never really been formal that way. You know, I used to have sketchbooks like more in college and stuff like that, but just I usually pick up a sheet of paper and go. These days when I draw them, occasionally I'll get on the iPad and do some digital drawing. But I still, although I've been able to make transitions sculpturally to digital drawing, like it still doesn't feel as natural to me yet, because I like that resistance that the paper gives the pencil, and it's a very slick surface digitally. So I'm getting better at it, but I still it's not my go-to. But I think largely when I'm designing a character, it's over 90%. I do it in the sculpting phase at this point. And it was largely in the sculpting phase even back when I was sculpting traditionally. But with ZBrush, I can get my ideas down faster than I can a lot of times on a sheet of paper these days. And it's such a malleable program that, you know, it's so easy to try 5 different head sizes, or, you know, I don't know, but, you know, 3 different hairstyles, whatever, you know, whatever it might be. And you know, of course, each one is saved. So it's a lot more, there's a lot more freedom in the design process for me in ZBrush. You know, where I can try anything, and, you know, if I don't like it, go back to the previous iteration, or push it further, you know, just without any fear of losing any work done. Oh, and I can't hear you now.
I forgot. We muted. Yeah.
Good.
I remember when I worked in the molding and casting room for you, if the head was a little bit too big, you'd have us like mold it 3 times to get it shrunken down. And now that malleability to go larger or smaller on, you know, in just a few minutes must be amazing for you to play with those proportions.
It's huge. It's huge. And I mean, not even from this, and it, you know, there's even multiple options. One is I change it in the program on the file, or, you know, when we're actually in the printing program, we're putting it on the printer, we could, you know, do it at 100%, 95%, 90%, and just punch those in and and try that.
Last minute change.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately for me, like I think the real bottom line with all of that stuff is, it's more time that can be spent on the creative part of the process, rather than, you know, like you said, like spending days to mold parts down. Or I still remember when we were doing, I mean, luckily I wasn't working on any of this stuff, but we were doing Ghostbusters for Mattel, and, you know, that was full actor approval on the likenesses, with some, you know, some of the actors being notoriously difficult. And, you know, there was a couple of instances there where we got to the point where the likeness was approved, except for the size. And then to spend all that time to get a likeness approved and, you know, perfect, and then have, like, you know, if you go and you're just shrinking it down through the molding process, it's distorting every time. You know, not an exact science. So, you know, a situation like that, or approvals, like when, you know, doing a licensed piece and you're going in for license or approval, yeah, the ability to go in and just make quick adjustments, you know, with really minimal repercussions, you know, from the creative end. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, with what I do now, it seems like, you know, you can even push things farther than you ever would have, because there's no fear of losing the old one, or how quickly you can do that change, you know, instead of, you know,
absolutely,
waiting for it to come out of the mold or something. So, yeah. So do you design the waves of figures in like a narrative sense, or do you just have this like huge tome of characters and you pull the ones out that you want to work on in that, you know, quarter or whatever? Is it something that, you know, Jeremy presents these things as like this whole narrative between all the characters? Is that how you think about it when you choose the characters you're going to do per wave?
It's a little bit of both. In the early days of the Mythic Legions in particular, Back then it really was just trying to hit cool character types, and then the story was ultimately formed around some of that, because as you know, like the early version of Mythic Legions, there was no story, there were no named characters, and there really weren't even faces on the characters. So in the early days, the story was built around those characters and kind of organically formed as the characters were created. Nowadays, though, that balance has certainly shifted, where there are certain designs or ideas for characters that we just want to get into a wave, and so we find a way to get them in. Like Reign of the Beasts or Rising Suns were very specific narrative waves, and the characters were completely built around the story that we needed to tell with those. Whereas a wave like Ashes of Agbendor, although there's a story to it, we set up a story for that one where it's a little bit more of a catch-all, where it was like a more old school mythic wave where we could get more variety of character types, character factions, and things like that. But even in that one, where it is like a little bit more of like a grab bag of character types, it still ultimately is woven into the story. So it really, it a lot of times does depend on what the particular purpose of that particular wave might be. The fall waves are usually heavily narrative focused, and so like from a creative standpoint, both of those are enjoyable, because if it's a really tightly focused theme on a wave, then we get to go into a particular theme and really dig into it and explore what we can do within those boundaries. Like the Necronominous wave, like we got to go wild with skeleton types, and then with the knights, like go what could we do with knight type characters, and ways to kind of push what that means. But then like an Ashes of Agbendor type line where there is more variety in it. That's fun to do as well, because there's just less rules in that particular case.
So do you use like your ZBrush models almost like a pop and swap when you're doing like the non-specific characters? Like, do you have files that you just bring in the different parts for, you have them all labeled like that, or how does that go? Or are they all coming from a drawing that you're doing, and then you're kind of finding the parts for that drawing?
It can actually be both. Sometimes I've got a drawing and it is that's a very specific look for the character, and then I'll go into my files and figure out what can I use to best get that look out of it. And then sometimes it really is, it's like a digital pop and swap session for me, where I'll just start opening up files. And I mean, really, it's getting to the point now where there's just so many parts. Sometimes I need to either open up old files or get on Source Horsemen and go wave by wave and just look at what's out there, because it's we worked with the same parts for so long, and then now over the past second half of the line, we've added the parts just at a much quicker pace. But yeah, I mean, sometimes and then sometimes there's a piece that like I've done, and we went ahead and tooled it, but it didn't make it into a wave, and it'll be, there's been an idea floating around for, how does that head and armor set, how's that going to fit into a wave? Because we know what the character is. How do we fit it into a wave, or perhaps even just with a little bit of tweaking on the character concept, make it fit the theme in a way that works for the line.
Cool. So like, how has the design of Mythos changed from year one? You know, that first show we did down in Toy Tokyo to now. Like, I remember discussing the weapons with you when you were designing the weapons, and you kind of wanted this balance between, you know, historic weapons, movie style props, and video game weapons. And now you seem to be, you know, shifting into this like high fantasy sort of design from like those 80s fantasy books. You know, is that like overall design changing over the years, or do you think it has been fairly consistent?
That's a good question. I think it's evolved. You know, it's evolved with the line. You know, I look back at you know, that first wave was hand sculpted. Most of the weapons were hand fabricated, as you well know. And you know, we had a little bit of a digital assist in those early days, but I mean, we were really just starting to touch on it. Like, I don't even think in wave one, like I think you knew ZBrush a little bit at that point. Like, I had never even touched it.
I took that class at SVA together, and Jim was totally lost, but I at least got the basics of it, I think. But yeah, and I remember like we would use digital to like take your left leg and flip it and 3D print the right leg or whatever, you know. And so it was like this very hands-on approach to digital, which was fascinating.
Yeah,
you know,
we probably. I mean, if you look at it now that we actually know what we're doing, we were really just almost making more work for ourselves.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But you know, at the time, yeah, I mean, we were doing with that, like it was the symmetry, since it was a pop and swap line, was so important that you know, it helped us to establish something consistent from that standpoint. But yeah, I mean, we were so scratching the surface at that point.
But it almost got you to it too, right? Like you kind of evolved from there.
Well, I'm sorry, what was that?
You kind of evolved into digital from there, so it allowed you to kind of grasp the idea, I think.
Yeah,
that
yeah. I mean, it was, you know, some people just they will just like, you know, crash course it and then go straight from one to the other. Yeah, for me, it was a really slow transition, especially because I couldn't slow down on hitting deadlines and all that. So you know, I had to keep going with what I was doing. But you know, as far as like is the, you know, the weapons and accessories, and I mean even the figures themselves, ZBrush like allows you to go in with such specificity on whatever you're working on, and you have such a level of control over it, that it just allows a greater level of detail, and you know, again, like, you know, you're not like fighting with the material or dealing with you know, an armature or, you know, whatever might be holding you back. Like, you're just going in and you know, executing on creative vision. And
it's that exploration, it seems, to allow you to explore those, especially like the filigree stuff, right? You
right.
can probably go there, try something, wipe it out, go back to the original, try it again. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. And you know, and so the weapons were, of course, they go along with all of that. You know, you can get it in on a blade on an axe, and you know, drop runes in it or textures, or you know, stretch it a little bit this way or that way, make the blade bigger, smaller, and so, you know, to getting more back to the like your specific question, I think it's allowed to, if we want to do something that's more historically accurate or, real world based, we can go in and hit that in a way that was much harder to achieve in plastic and ren and stuff like that. But it also allows, because I do think like conceptually we are still somewhat in the same mindset that we were back then. It's like, if we want certain weapons to be very believable, feel very utilitarian, and practical, but some of them are just completely over the top and pure fantasy and ridiculous, at a certain point. But we can push that stuff further now too. So, there maybe that there's less in between. The stuff that's fantastical really goes fantastical, and the stuff that's, if we're just doing a broadsword or a Viking shield or something like that, like it's very much represents what it's based on.
Awesome. Yeah. And you kind of talked about this a little bit, but has ZBrush changed your design sense or even how you design it? How specifically has the digital realm influenced that part of it? Like that freedom, I guess you talked about, but is there anything else that it's done?
It just, I think back to a character like Necronominus is a good example. Because that character was designed before a single figure was ever in anybody's hands. It was for year one design.
I remember seeing sketches of that guy pretty early on.
Yeah, that was one that got a full drawing. That was actually went to that much effort on him. But it's, for me, I enjoy going back and looking at that sketch and then looking at what I was able to accomplish with the figure. And that's many times when we get to a character that's been a long time coming. Like, I'm just so glad we didn't release that in the first couple of years. Because working in digital space and being able to print it out and everything, like, I was able to do things with that figure that I just couldn't have done otherwise. Like, to make those wings, of course, like, we could have done it. We did stuff without ZBrush for years, but I think it was more spindly. Like, the bones were longer and thinner. That the headdress for Necronominus, like, being able to do that rib cage type treatment with the wings inside of it and all that. I don't know, like, originally it was a solid headdress, and it probably would have been a solid headdress if I would have done it in Castelline. So just there's things like that just I do think ZBrush has allowed me to be a better designer, because it allows me to do the sort of things that are in my head and that I would have loved to have done at a certain point, but the limitations would have held me back. So yeah, I think it's just
how much of
opened
a
just opened up the possibilities.
Sure. Okay. And then you've always had a team behind you, ever since I was there and before that, to help you manifest everything that's in your head. So now that you're full-time mythic and cosmic and everything else, and you have a team behind you that can be full-time, all of that, has that changed your design sense or your narrative sense or anything else, like just that freedom across the board through the company and production? Like, how has that influenced you?
I think kind of a running theme here is like just the world and the possibilities have opened up because of the team that we've put together. It's allowed us to tell more story. It's allowed us to make more figures. Even make cool things that aren't necessarily in the toy line. We can make skateboard decks and pins and things like that now. And so it's having a full team is just, it's allowed us to grow Mythic and Cosmic both into something that just as it's more fully realized than I think I could have even imagined in those early days. The fact that we show up at Legion's Con and have life-size versions of the characters there.
That's pretty cool.
We have put together dioramas specifically for wave releases, and then we're able to bring those to the shows. It's just it's just so rewarding now to be able to again, like, to just be able to share the world in a way. Even like early on, Nate was doing art for us.
Yep.
Like at night, when he wasn't at his day job. Now Nate is pumping out art all day for us. So,
and he has employees now too. So
right. Well, and that is the way things grow. It's like everybody hits bandwidth, and then, all right, well, this person needs an assistant or a helper, but yeah,
David's right here.
But before it was like, okay, well, we had the same card for how many years without any real art updates, or then maybe the troll box or the ogre box. Now we're doing different art changes every release. Being able
and
to
you have Trevor doing those, the photography that adds to the narrative. Besides, it used to be like me or CB taking a really bad photo that goes on the package, and now you have this whole narrative that comes across with it. It's amazing.
I mean, that stuff. When I still to this day, every time I see one of those environmental shots come back, I'm just blown away because it immerses you in the world. Like they look like screenshots from a live action film. It's like they're like stills. And so like it's I've said, if at some point if we are ever like pitching this again as entertainment, like that's proof of concept. Like that's what the world looks like with these characters in it. But it's and again, like the team aspect of it is huge. We got CJ, and the CJASM team doing the soft goods for us, and so now we're not just cutting out a piece of fabric and putting a couple holes in the back of it, which worked well, and it was fine. But now you've got capes that are posable. They add drama and life to the figures, and it's
and now being in the industry, I help the company I work for do that sort of thing, and it's amazing the quality and the amount of soft goods you guys are able to do with the company you have. You're able to put 100% behind those types of improvements, that a larger company just can't afford to do. So it's amazing to watch that and how that adds to the narrative of each character they come with.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's watching the team grow has been fun to see, because it's like, and we're greedy, because we'll get to the point where we'll finally get somebody on board, and then it's like, well, yeah, but now if we're good, but if we could get Nate on board full time, like then I'd be satisfied. And then we get Nate on, and then it's like, well, who's next? Because it's luckily we're in a position where we are, we are growing, have been growing. diversifying, and you know, there's just everybody hits a point where we need that, and that's how we've grown as far as staff has gone. Is it's we hit a point where somebody can't do it all anymore, and so we find somebody else, and usually it's not finding somebody else. Usually there's somebody that's in mind, and we bring them in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, Eric, for doing this. We want to keep this kind of short and sweet for everybody, but I think it helps fans here stay connected to you guys in New Jersey, those of us who can't always make it out to New Jersey for the big convention. And thank you for being an influence to me. You've been a real mentor in my career. And so, a big thank you to you and CB and Jim for, helping me get into the industry. And, I'm happy to help be here, represent the company, and help Nate sell some toys for you guys. But you've been, amazing friends to me ever since I even left you guys. So thank you very much.
I still remember the first day you showed up at the office.
Me too.
I think
I tried to wear a shirt and tie, and it just did not fit in with your guys' vibe. So.
Yeah, because I remember that day we had just come back from the city. We were meeting with somebody from Mattel.
Yep.
And you really took our route, because the first time we went to Mattel, we went out there in suits and ties, and then everybody walks into the conference room in shorts and Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
And then then you came in a few years later doing the same thing. So we knew the scenario.
And now I'm working for your old boss. So full circle.
It is bizarre. It is a very small industry. That is.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, we got a few questions, or I'd like to call them more requests from our crew. And if anybody here has a question for Eric, he's got a few minutes if you've got a question. So we got a few I can read off here.
Cool.
Are females and goblins, kind of the 2.0 body, getting a 3.0 treatment? So I'm kind of putting this not as a question, because I know you can't talk about future events, but do you have any? Would you like to say, yeah, sure, I'll think about that?
Well, I mean, I definitely have thought about it. I'm constantly thinking about that kind of thing.
And you have
I would. What's that?
You have that new female barbarian coming out, so that's kind of a improvement on that, right?
That was more of like a scale change with her. Like, right. She's a more buff, like fuller build. I'm assuming with 3.0, that's referring more to adding in the double joints and like articulation improvements.
I think.
I definitely would like to do that. We're in an interesting spot now because, we've developed the 3.0 body, when we've solicited the 3.0 body. I've even seen some test shots of parts of it at this point, but nobody has them in hand yet. And even at Legion's Con, when we showed it, like, some pretty, prominent members of the community, expressed their reservations about it. And I mean, I've had my reservations about it. It's a big change. We wanted to handle it in a very sensitive way, considering that people have invested a lot into the build system, and we needed to do it in a way that didn't put a dead end onto that compatibility. And so, but of course, this all comes at a time where we basically just revamped the 1.0 bear body. We've just revamped the female body. We've revamped the knight body. So, now immediately we're turning around and re-exploring a lot of these body types. But the nice thing is the old tooling doesn't go away either.
Yep. It's all investments, right? You're investing in this body, so it's not like it's going to just disappear.
Absolutely. And with the interchangeability, trying to keep that as in place as possible. It also, even moving forward, you've got a couple options. But yeah, I mean, that's, especially if it's successful, I want to, readdress all of the different body types on these figures and, update them, improve them, and, especially if everybody's happy with it, then, it's even more motivation to do it.
Sure. Then we've got some requests for new versions of Xylona and Etherion, which I think, have you talked about that before? I know Etherion is one of those big characters you're bound to get to.
Yeah, it's both of those are in the planning stages. Since we did Basilia and Leodicius, Xylona and Etherion were both such early characters that I want to give them an updated treatment where we can put the tooling that they deserve toward them. And I don't know when and where that's going to happen yet. Just need to find the right spot for it and the right just the right reason to get them out there.
Sure. And then we have another request for some more kind of blank bodies, which I think you're kind of answering with your armory builds and things like the barbarian and stuff like that. This is specifically, asking for things without even heads, but I think that kind of gets into logistical issues there, right? Without, how do you sell a non-full figure?
Yeah, it's something that comes up fairly regularly, and it's for us, I think we look at it like, I don't know, the armory is a good example. If you're talking about a knight figure, if you're gonna do the body without a head or the gear, for us, the adding in the head or the gear doesn't really change the cost on it that much. And so at that point, we would rather just offer a Legion builder.
Sure.
Because I think what we're always trying to kind of walk the line on is, when we're at Legions Con or at the shows, the fans that are there are, I think, the customizing community is heavily represented, and the folks that take the figures and go beyond just posing or displaying or whatever.
Sure.
But a huge percentage of the people who buy these figures, they don't get creative with the figures, in that way after. And so to a large portion of our audience, a blank body doesn't mean anything. So again, if you do something like a Legion builder that's virtually a blank body, except for it's got a head and a couple weapons with it, that makes more sense across the board. It's not, but I'll say this, we haven't shut the door on that either. I mean, we're always talking about things like that, or we did the head packs recently. We've done, we do accessory packs and stuff like that, and it's so we're always discussing what can we add in that kind of product category.
Sure.
That brings something compelling to the table. It doesn't step on any of the 3D printers and customizers out there. So, and just trying to find the balance with all of that.
And then the stuff Jeremy designs for the Legions Con is all about that, right? You know, the extra parts and the extra limbs and stuff that they always add in seems to be to promote the customization. And then that, along with your armory build, seems like it's almost the answer, right? You're practically there.
Yeah, the armory build was a ton of fun, and it seemed like people really liked it too. So that was cool.
I remember that was early conversations in the line, was doing things like that, and how would you ever do it? So you seem to have figured that out. Congratulations.
Well, I mean, would you have imagined those early days sitting around looking at those pieces that there would be a show dedicated to the line?
It's insane. It's taken off. Wow. Does anybody here have a question for Eric? Come on up.
When is he coming out here?
Nate wants you to come out here. I think everybody is in agreement there.
We definitely want to do it at some point. I mean, we are on the West Coast this year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're not quite in that neck of the woods, but we're at least on that end of the country.
Question.
At your sculpting, as you're sculpting, like, how much thought are you putting into stuff like paint colors and soft goods, stuff that's like not existing as you're sculpting it? Do you, after it's sculpted and printed or something, do you throw it to the painters or CGS them to kind of figure out themselves, or do you have a very specific kind of like palette that you want them to work with, or
again, this answer probably sounds like a broken record at this point. I mean, it does vary from project to project. Like, there's certain characters where the color scheme is completely worked out from day one, and the soft good needs, like, I know what they are from the very beginning, and so there's not a lot of variation from that from that vision from when I started to when it goes through other people working on the project. And then there's sometimes there'll be a project where let's say we're talking about paint, where I'll hand it off and say, I don't know, like when Cameron was working on the Sphexians for Cosmic Legions, with those, I didn't do a color study on it. We more just talked about it a little bit, and I'm just like, just take it and run with it. So it really works both ways. With the soft goods, sometimes what CJ does looks exactly like my render, and then other times he'll take it and run with it and do something amazing. And it's a situation where Cameron, Sherry, Joe, Bill, Eric, whoever's painting, like that's what they do. They're experts at color and painting. CJ and Keithlin, they're experts at soft goods. Like, they know that's a different world, from sculpting in ZBrush. And so they, all these members of the team, like, they take their skill set and their knowledge and, bring it to the figure and, apply it in a way where, and, if it is something where there's a specific need, they'll follow the request. Or if it's something where it's a little more open, they bring amazing ideas to the project.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions? The master. No? Nate, do you have a question? We're going to get some.
I was asked, when are we going to see more monstery females?
Monstery? So asking for a friend. When are we going to see more monstery females? Yeah. Monstrous females. Basilia's coming. Yeah. He wants. Okay, we're just saying we want more monstrous females in the line.
I'm cool with that. I've always been a fan of bringing the same type of, like, diversity of species and looks, to the female characters the same way that we do with the male characters. Whether or not they're the response is always as solid, that's a different story. But I feel like we can get away with more of that within Mythic and Cosmic than we were able to get away with and other lines we've worked on in the past. So I'm absolutely up for that.
Very cool. All right. I think that's it. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us here in Sacramento. Woo! And we will talk again soon, I hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, it looks like it's an awesome space there.
Oh yeah, it's a nice clean space. It's kind of Star Wars themed, so it's every decade of Star Wars toys is on the wall or in cases. And it's a space where they run D&D campaigns, for people. And
nice.
I think they're going to do a trial of your role-playing game sometime during the day here. So,
cool.
Galaxy Game Cafe.
Galaxy Game Cafe in Citrus Heights, California.
There you go.
And here is Brick Something. Thank you so much, Brick, for all of your marketing you've done.
100%. Yeah, and thank you for taking the time to hang out with us and all of these folks. We're going to try and do our best to keep bringing you all out here and have some representation on the West Coast because we need it. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric, very much, and we'll talk soon.
All right, cool. All right, take care.
All right, have a good day, Eric.